This is probably my favorite concept of all, because this is where the power of change comes from, associated with the fifth key strategy, faith. And I want to start by stating this quote by William James. The faculty of voluntarily bringing back a wandering attention over and over again is the very root of judgment, character, and will. And this is very closely tied to another statement of a fascinating individual. His name is Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz, and he's from UCLA School of Medicine. And he does a lot of work with patients who struggle with severe OCD. And many of the techniques that he uses are very similar to what we're talking about here. And this is what he says about attention. Listen carefully to these words. And, we've talked a little bit about willpower in the past, why willpower isn't strong enough in and of itself. But let's talk about where the will comes into play. Now, this is what Dr. Schwartz says, and I love this statement. He says, the quality of awareness or attention determines the nature of consciousness that arises and therefore the action that will take place. The only willful choice one has is the quality of attention one gives to a thought at any moment. The strain of attention is the fundamental act of will. So if we ask the question, well, where does my will come into play? It's back to that statement. The strain of attention is the fundamental act of will. Each of us, from moment to moment, are bombarded by many thoughts. And we choose which thought we're going to pay attention to. And remember that statement from a past segment of Viktor Frankl, where he states, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So we always have a choice of what to do with our thoughts. And when we have a number of different thoughts that are vying for our attention, there's a strain to hold on to one of them. And that's where the practice of mindfulness and meditation that I'll teach you in this segment that will help you to hang on to a thought that you choose to hang on to, rather than the mind just being distracted and you're going in a million different directions. And there's a certain form of meditation that we'll talk about when we get to the exercise in this section that will show you how to do that. This is critical to understand because there's many who struggle with addiction issues and particularly with pornography, that they can run through tapes in their mind and they're thinking certain things on a regular basis, and yet they say they're sober. And in the brain cannot tell the difference between a thought that's repeatedly and vividly imagined and one we actually see with our eyes. And see, what mindfulness and faith will teach us in these segments is that we have two sets of eyes. We have our physical eyes that we actually see things with, and then we also have our spiritual eyes, or whatever you want to call them, where you can close your eyes and you can visualize things. So if you close your eyes right now, and I ask you to visualize a red Volkswagen, what do you see? Now put that red Volkswagen by a beach, and there's a palm tree next to it, and the waves, you hear the waves crashing on the shore and feel a soft breeze on your skin. What happens when I paint that picture for you? You actually see it. How do we do that? It's this type of power that we need to access more to become proactive in developing the life that we want to. So another way to look at the way our mind functions is from classic terms that perhaps you remember from your high school psychology text. Sigmund Freud coined these terms, the id, the ego, and the superego. So if you're to think of that picture of a picture of an iceberg, okay, and liken it unto the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex, the 10 to 15% above the waterline would be like the prefrontal, and what's below would be the limbic system, okay? So there's three concepts, these three ideas of the id, ego, and superego that really make a lot of sense. And I believe we can all relate to them. So if we were to look at the iceberg and picture it kind of as a triangle, and at the bottom of one side, we have the id, and that can be likened unto it. In Sigmund Freud's terminology, it's the same thing. The id is a spoiled child. It wants what it wants now, and the very nature of addiction is instant gratification. Doesn't want to put anything off. It wants what it wants when it wants it. Thank you very much. No questions asked. Now, at the very opposite end, in the other corner of the triangle, is something we call the superego. The superego is the part of us that's the critical judge, meaning that we're never quite good enough, right? It's the part that if you got 98% on a test, what would your superego say? It would say, you should have got 100%. If you got 100%, it would say something like, well, could you have done some extra credit? So this part's never completely satisfied, and this part is completely impulsive and craves things. And these two are at odds with each other. So it's like many people who struggle with addiction are playing the teeter-totter game. They're just going like this. They act out, and then the limbic system is satisfied, and so it lets go of its cravings and drives because it's satisfied. And then the moral compass comes in, the superego, and goes, oh my gosh, what did you just do? A horrible, horrible person, which makes this thing more stressed out. And so the teeter-totter goes back and forth and back and forth. And so what we've got to do, and this is where mindfulness practice comes in, is go to this higher point, the conscious part of us. And again, these two parts down here are more unconscious. They just do what they do. But this higher point up here we call the ego. That's the part that's conscious, that deals with reality on a moment-by-moment basis. So as we practice mindfulness through the meditation that I'm going to teach you, we strengthen the prefrontal part of the brain so that it can navigate between these two. So it has to pay attention to what each of these are saying. So, it's and neither of these, we got to say neither of these down here, the id or the superego, they're not bad. They just do what they do. We're grateful that we have a superego that pushes us to excellence. What would we achieve if we didn't have that? And if everything was just dull and we didn't receive any pleasure, life would have no meaning, right? So we need both of these, but we need someone to negotiate between the two and kind of manage them. That's what the ego is. And usually the perfect response to what this thing wants and this thing wants can be found in the middle ground. And for example, the id wants, it's already had a piece of chocolate cake. It wants 4 more pieces, just wants more and more. And I want another gallon of ice cream with it. Superego is going, hey, you need to chill out a little bit. You know what? You're not going to feel good tomorrow and blah, blah, blah. You're going off your diet and so forth. Now, both of these are doing their things. The ego's job is to say, oh, I get it. It wants more. I totally understand it. I hear you. And I hear you going, whoa, you've had enough. And then this part can come down here and say, listen, you've had enough cake. It did taste good. It's in our system, but that's enough. Or maybe you can have one little sliver more, will satisfy you, but you can't have 4 more pieces. And then this part can be chilled out a little bit too. And so that's a dance that we're all involved with every single day, is trying to find that middle ground. And as you practice more of these key strategies, practice becoming more aware, acknowledging what's happening, letting the surrender happen, letting certain things just be, then mindfully you can choose what you're going to do based on your future vision statement that we're going to talk about in segment 5. And I would encourage you to spend the adequate time necessary to read through this chapter. There's just too much to cover on this video, but read through it line by line and underline it, make notes of what makes sense to you. And as you focus on mindfulness, as you have the basic understanding of the first key strategies, it will start to make more sense to you and hopefully instill in you this fire or ignite a passion of how exciting your future really can be.